Hello and welcome to this week's Market Talk. Today we have with us Jacquie Jenkins, who is the MD of HB Catering and Refrigeration, and we have Glenn Roberts, who is the Sales Director of Winterhalter UK. So thank you both for joining us this week. I'm going to start off with Jacquie because there's been a couple of quite new developments at HB. One of these is that you guys have launched a rental service. So can you, equipment hire, can you tell us a little bit more about what prompted you to give this offering now?
Yeah, what we felt was that people's business models would have changed considerably, and that we could envisage, particularly in the West Wales region, that when a lot of sites reopened, they would want to possibly do more pop-up facilities, outdoors, so outdoor bars, outdoor catering, barbecue areas. And we felt that people wouldn't want to commit the funds possibly to having static facilities, and that it would be far better if they could rent equipment. And so that's why we went with that concept.
Great stuff. And what's the feedback from your clients been since this launch?
The feedback's been pretty good. Towards the end of the, would it be second or third lockdown, we found that people had grants, because I think it's been slightly different in Wales, the grant system, and some people were wanting to pay outright for kit. But we've also found that we have had quite a few inquiries, and they have led to some, pretty good rentals. But the problem at the moment seems to be getting kit from suppliers. Suppliers are running out of equipment, and that's also starting to impact on the spares side. Spares are starting to go into short supply as well. So, what can you do?
Certainly some big challenges, which we'll probably come back to that shortly, actually, Jacquie. I'm just going to bring Glenn into the conversation. And speaking of launches, Winterhalter has just made quite a big significant product launch into the UK marketplace. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Glenn?
Yes, well, thank you, Andrew, and good morning, everybody. And yes, I think irrespective of whatever the economic conditions are and this rather catastrophic last 15 to 16 months that we've endured, you cannot stop that process of R&D and development of product to be relevant in today's marketplace. And we know that there are lots of challenges out there, and ourselves included, that we've had to contend with. But in the pipeline for a little while has been the complete revamping of our pass-through ranging, which has been in the marketplace for several years. And utilising the information intelligence that we've gathered, not just from the UK marketplace, but primarily across Europe, we've identified areas that we would look to improve the product on. Some that were introduced through the gestation period of the current product models, and then shown them manifesting themselves in the new product. And of course, like our good friends at Rationale last year, when they were trying to conduct a very extensive launch, it's a bit tough to do it when many of the doors aren't open, the lights aren't on, and the people who are at work are having to work extremely hard to cover, like I'm sure Jacquie and her team, to cover the demand that is out there with perhaps more skeleton crews. But we try to do this in a way that is accessible to everybody, with an invited audience for the initial set of virtual presentations. That was about 24 minutes long, with a great introduction from Stephen Kincaid, our MD, and then a top and tailing session with him as well, but also giving an overview of where the improvements and the benefits have been added to this very important product range for us, to move the product forward in terms of wash performance, hygiene, the economic efficiency, and its usability, and the pressures our operators are under, particularly at the moment, where they're really struggling to get hands-on, whether they're behind a stove or behind a till or working front of house, or of course within the pot wash area. This means you've got to produce product that's simple and easy to use, that works 24/7, 365 for lots of operators.
And there was a big emphasis, I think, when you made the launch, about the kind of volume of customer feedback that you'd use to shape this generation of products.
We had Vox popped a whole range of people, whether they're working within the service supply chain, where they're seeing, materially the product on a day-to-day basis from the inside out, as it were. Our consultants, our distributor partners, and as I said, across Europe as well, and involving consultants to find out what also customers are asking them for. It's very easy for manufacturers to fall into the perhaps mistake of making what they like making rather than making what people want to buy. And that's quite difficult to get when you're in an ever-moving environment. But plus, of course, we've got to make sure it's at the right kind of price point that makes it affordable, because frankly, any manufacturer can go out tomorrow and pretty much make a product that will last forever, but the cost of it would be prohibitive and nobody would buy it. So we've got to have that balance right between cost efficiency and value to customer, and trying to lead the way in those areas as well to create that thought leadership in terms of sustainability, build quality, and basically recognizing that the environment we're operating in, we are working towards a zero carbon target for 2050. Many of our big operators are already challenging us now because they're looking to bring that forward, their own claims of zero carbon being brought forward to say 2030. And in real terms, if you're producing and manufacturing, but also designing the kitchens of tomorrow, you're probably only 1 to 2 kitchen cycles away having to really address that. And fundamentally, it's producing products that are efficient to use, the cost of ownership is the lowest, the cost of purchase may not be, but it's actually using that in that mid to long term to say there are some real benefits for operators in terms of use of electricity, water, and of course detergents and chemicals that go into the product.
Sure.
Good stuff, Glenn. I just want to pick up on something that Jackie said earlier about supply chain issues, because obviously this seems to be something that's affecting most manufacturers and suppliers across the UK. So can you just tell me a little bit about how Winterhalter are managing those issues?
Well, it's bizarre actually, because we were trying to prepare for almost the perfect storm of Brexit, which seems like a distant memory now, before the pandemic consumed everybody's attention in a way that we could never imagine. So there was a lot of stock building going on, not just with us, but across the wider marketplace. We took the opportunity to fundamentally change how we, our stock levels on spare parts, Jackie, as well, to a level that was going to give us approaching a year's worth of stock availability, to ensure that if there were supply chain issues, we were at least able to repair and mend products through that period. We also built the stocks accordingly, so we had the right kind of levels. I'm going to touch the only kind of wood I've got in my little space here, which is there, and say that so far so good. However, we are seeing quite a significant increase in demand now across continental Europe, as various markets are coming in and out of their availability. And our 2 factories in Germany and our factory in Switzerland are working full tilt to hit those numbers. One of the great things with our product range as well is that flexibility of the carcass we make can be then adapted to be whatever the customer needs it to be. And we may need to do work, for instance, in a workshop, but that conversion of a dishwasher to a glass washer needs IDD, detergent, bayonets, etc., or then configured to different wash cycles. We can then do that before it goes out. It does afford us a little bit more flexibility, but I'd be utterly naive to say that at some stage we may have some kind of issues. What our colleagues on the continent have done, however, is trying to control that holiday period. So traditionally, manufacturers, particularly in Southern Europe, would almost take 4 to 6 weeks off on holiday, and if you hadn't built your stocks up through that period, you'd have issues. But I think it also highlights as well, Jackie's comment there, where products coming from further afield, that control of an elongated supply chain is becoming more difficult and in fact more costly when you look at the container rates, etc., and shipping rates coming, for instance, from China. And so a lot of people have been looking closer to home, and that's put even more demand upon those factories that may not have been able to be in a position to have cash flow to build up their stock holding or have those parts in place to have their finished goods completed. So I think there's a whole conundrum of issues that people have tried to address. And we are hearing, Jackie, from peer group companies, others out there, that it is starting to bite a little bit. In some ways, it's a good problem because, hey, there's demand back in the market, but it still doesn't help when people want something yesterday. And trying to get within both the end users who have been used to a just-in-time delivery service for, in fact, probably a decade or so. And it only takes one small thing in that just-in-time logistical supply chain to fail, and it becomes a problem. And for instance, if it is dish and glass washers, they're operationally very important. And when you're short-handed, having lots of people bending over double sinks trying to wash product, in fact, not very hygienically, it's a significant issue.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I share the pain.
it's a really tough time, isn't it? Oh gosh, but let's say we'll park that for now, and Jackie, I'll come back to you. With this new hire offering, you said that you were going to try and recruit a couple of new starters for your company. So have you managed to do that? How is the whole recruitment process going at this time?
At the moment, we've actually recruited a new salesman, which is something that we hadn't envisaged doing for quite some time. So yeah, we've recruited one. There's another in the pipeline, but we're just waiting for it to pick up and get a little bit busier. We've kind of shot ourselves in the foot a bit by putting on the hotline, because we put on the hotline basically for customers to ring in. We thought, well, quite a lot of things we can actually fix by phone, which is, saying to people, well, have you given it a run through? Have you checked your filters? Have you, have you done your necessary tasks? But it seems to have created service calls instead from people that we've never actually dealt with or haven't dealt with for a long time. So it actually seems to have brought more people on board, which is a great problem to have. But when you're still on flexi furlough in some areas, and of course we have, like Glenn, we have engineers in both England and Wales, and they're moving at different paces. Areas are being unlocked at different paces. So whereas we might be rushed off our feet on the English side, then next thing Wales goes bananas, and obviously there's staff holidays to consider, and half terms been, and some engineers have had to be off. So it's kind of given us a good headache, but a headache nonetheless. And obviously, as Glenn alludes to, the supply chain these days is the just in time, and we're having to get spares in, and it's starting to prove difficult. Not so much, we haven't noticed it. Certainly Winterhalter haven't let us down on spares yet, but it's the refrigeration side of the industry, because obviously it's summer. Coming out of a pandemic and the usual summer rush is starting to create problems, particularly in the refrigeration side of the game.
And how are you managing that, Jackie? Are you now having to source from suppliers that you haven't necessarily worked with in the past?
Yeah, we are having to do that. I mean, obviously, we did carry quite a lot of stock anyway. We carry a lot of warehouse stock. But it tends to be because our customers are usually fairly well templated. We're working for sites where we know what they need. This rush of new customers that we put the hotline on for, and we weren't expecting to convert into service calls. They seem to have kit that's quite unusual in some respects that we don't normally see, so we are having to look further afield for supplies, and also, whereas normally it would be a next day delivery, delivery services seem pushed to the limit, and the carriers are trying to deliver at 10 o'clock at night and saying you're closed. Well, yeah, we are closed, we do sleep sometimes, so that is also becoming a problem, the actual delivery. And we're noticing, particularly with equipment delivery, some firms or some companies are using carriers that they wouldn't normally use.
Yes.
And we are actually starting to see kit arriving damaged, which is something that is quite unusual because they're not using their normal carriers. I think we've had 3 or 4 deliveries of late where we've had equipment with dents and bangs and bumps on it. You know, so obviously there's a problem there with the delivery supply chain as well.
Yeah, these are all the kind of knock-on things, aren't they, that happen when, you know, you're forced to kind of try and adapt, and you know, conditions are changing all the time. I mean, the other factor to consider as well is obviously the kind of the cost and pricing side. And I know manufacturers at the moment are under enormous pressure to absorb that because of all the material costs and so on, and the shipping costs. Obviously, at some point this all gets fed down the chain. Are you starting to see a lot of price increases in the market now, Jackie, and how are you dealing with that, if so?
Yeah, we are starting to see price increases, and it makes even more work for us in the office, because normally where you think, oh yeah, I've quoted that, and you know, in 30 days time, maybe when the customer finally accepts it, the price will still be the same. We're now having to get more quotations actually in writing, because, you know, and make sure that it's live for 60 days or whatever it may be. You know, because prices are starting to change so fast. You know, you can order something, you can quote something this week, you go to order it next week and they say, oh, there's a price increase on that. You know, well, and that's not really much good in our industry, because, you know, if you've given someone a firm quote, that's what they expect it to be.
Yeah.
You know, so it is making more work within the office, actually tying people down to firm quotes.
Oh gosh, yeah, that sounds like a bit of a bureaucratic nightmare. But we'll come back to that. We'll just restart conversation with Glenn. There's been the government super deduction scheme. So, I mean, has that at all boosted sales for you guys? Has that helped the supply chain at all?
I think it's much easier for us to say when we have more than about 60% of the market open, or whatever the figure may be, depending on what segment it's in. But I know when these incentives have been offered to the marketplace before, it's not really been very well received, and primarily because the operator at the coalface that we tend to speak to, and Jackie and her colleagues will speak to, are really quite divorced from the head office and the guy who would be the accountant working through the capital allowance taxes, etc. Undoubtedly, it's a good move. I think if you could ally it to even some kind of scrappage scheme that would cover something that said if you did have an old energy profligate product that to be replaced, and there would be a scheme along those lines, which there is an interesting paper being created by the FEA and Keith Warren and the team there with their proposals to BEIS, the government department, on what we would advise as a group of manufacturers would be the best way forward to really incentivize and put some growth back in the marketplace. It's a complex narrative, Andrew. It's quite hard for people to understand if they're not accountants. So yes, it will be taken up. I think at the moment it's very much the last of the worries of the guys involved in what they're doing, because it's getting through the day job and getting however they're doing it. And of course we are seeing and hearing, not just anecdotally, but with our own experience, where people are open at the moment in England, with fortunate enough to have large spaces outside their buildings. They're trying to run an app-driven business with, say, 2 people who may be local 18-year-olds trying to service 200 people sitting in a beer garden. You know, and that's a lot of the issue we're getting and seeing in some of the places. So look, as a concept, Andrew, yes, bring it on. Let's have whatever we can that's going to help incentivize the replacement and purchasing of new capital equipment that may in fact be 10, 20 times more energy efficient. You know, pick a number depending on what you're looking at than what's currently chugging away in a kitchen space at the moment.
And has the various stages of unlocking in terms of, say, obviously England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland have been at different stages all together. Have you seen a direct correlation to your sales in terms of how the unlocking is going?
Yes, Claire, and it's of course happened at different times at different places. And when we're lucky like we are that we do cover a breadth of the market. So, you know, the pub market is very different from the current hotel market, and certainly very different from the B&I contract catering marketplace at the moment, where all those business models are trying to be pivoted to get to a way to to offer a service and make money to whoever's going to be in a place of work moving forward. But yes, we do see that as it roller coasters around, and as Jackie's intimated there as well, you know, trying to support that growth in the market with flexi furlough being in place and slowly adapting and mending that. And you know, just as a point, you know, we had a tremendously difficult year last year, having to look at our headcount and our overall resources and having to make some tremendously difficult decisions along those lines. But I'm happy to say that in the last 2 weeks, we've got adverts out for 10 new roles with the business, both internally and then externally as well, that at least indicative of that turning and that general upturn, which you've probably seen in the last 6 weeks. So in terms of machine sales against our really quite conservative budget for this year, it's very strong. It's those parts of the business that reliant upon doors being open, lights being on, and people coming in to spend money and put it in the till. So that does relate to the spare parts sales, chemical sales, and of consumables, and of course service. So you know, we've got a reasonably simple algorithm that applies to how we're drawing those guys back when the work starts to increase. And Jacquie, you know this as well. You know, when you've got large territories and large distance, getting an engineer to go from A to Z is quite difficult when there's B, C, D, and they've got to drive through to get there. So trying to organise those is very, 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 can be very tough. But you know, we've got a great department with really committed professionals that really want to get the job done and do it to the best of their ability. So you know, people are going over and above because they know that we're in a very difficult time. That at least the light at the end of the tunnel now isn't a train coming at us at 100 miles an hour.
Certainly. This week obviously has brought the delay to the roadmap by around 4 weeks at the very least. Does that change anything about your strategy overnight in order to contend with that?
I think where we are with that, Andrew, is that if it's just kick the can down the road for a short period of time, there may be a little softening of demand for a period of time, for a week or two, but that demand will still be there. You know, we still have a significant amount of our customer base who have not opened at all since last March, not a beam, nothing. You know, and those independent operators that may have, say, 40 to 60 covers in their restaurant, social distancing brings it down to, say, 20 to 25, and they're used to working with a brigade of, say, 4 to 8 chefs, and they're not even going to pay half of their wages with that, and that's before they're looking at front of house staff as well. So the economics just don't stack up. It needs full opening without restrictions from many of those guys to contemplate it, and also for many of those large groups to actually open up the doors fully and move it to the next stage. And you know, that will come in time. I still think there will be significant percentage of the population that will feel very cautious and unnerved by being back out into that environment. When you see the demographic of the people who are currently out eating and drinking and enjoying it, there's not very many people over, say, 30. You know, it's a part of the market of the population that feel relatively indestructible. But if this buys us time for a few weeks to get more injections into more arms, I think that should make everybody feel more positive. And let's hope that this will be the last of it from July, and then we can move forward and the market can bounce back far more positively than it's been able to do so far.
Yeah, sure. I think the whole industry is certainly behind that. Jacquie, we'll give the final word to you. As you've described, it's been such a busy time. You've launched a leasing program, kitchen hotline. You've kind of diversified more into the service area. What's the next thing you're planning? Can you give us any insight into what's around the corner?
Gosh, who knows what's around the corner? I don't think I know or Boris Johnson knows, but you know, I mean, obviously it's going to take time to get back to our former levels. It makes you rethink your whole business model, certainly. I mean, I was 60 last Saturday before last, I think, was it? 29th of May.
Would never have thought it.
Thank you very much. And where I would have probably 3 years or so ago been starting to think about retirement, certainly with 2 years of the Brexit debacle, followed by 18 months of COVID, you know, you sit back and it really makes you rethink your business model and your business plan, and where we go as a company, both on sales, service, PPM. You know, we're doing more janitorial than we used to do. You know, trying to be a more of an all-round service, you know, to our existing customers and to attract more in. We obviously do design in-house as well, and planning and what have you. So, you know, we're a good all-round company, but it certainly does make you sit back and think to yourself, you know, where are we going to be in 6 months, a year's time? You know, you've totally got to remodel your business. And I mean, I've got to be, you know, the staff, the team, you know, have been fantastic, you know, and fortunately, you know, we haven't had to lose any employees, which has been great. And I know that bigger companies, you know, the likes of Winterhalter, I'm sure they've had to make much harder decisions than me when it comes to staffing levels. But yeah, where do we go? I don't know. Who knows? You know, but I'm sure it's going to be an exciting roller coaster. But I certainly believe that, you know, all companies who've managed to get through this far, once we get full opening, you know, there's that pent up demand there, you know, and I think that, you know, the hospitality industry will come roaring back, bigger, better, stronger, you know, and move forward. And you know, I'm quite positive for the future, as I'm sure no doubt Glenn is.
Yeah, so I agree with you actually, Jackie, and I think it's quite important for us to recognise as well that if operators do have a piece of equipment they've invested significantly in, having the right service and support, as you mentioned, planned preventative maintenance, sweating that asset for as long as possible. If you're not taking care of your kit, it's not going to last as long, it won't perform properly, it won't work to its optimum. You've got to end users got to understand that and not see it as an unnecessary cost. And very few people plan for their product to break down, and usually it will break down when it's working its hardest, and it's going to be the most amount of problems to those operators. So having a bit more of an overview and a long-term view will certainly be better. And you know, if there are positives to be dragged from this, then it absolutely will have accelerated natural selection in the marketplace. You know, and what we are seeing, in actual fact, is people are carefully considering their investment in their business. They've proven to themselves they've succeeded, they've survived, therefore they want to make themselves as financially sound as they can, and that is about investing in their equipment, how it gets looked after, and with this lack of staffing as well, perhaps investing in your people a little bit better and making sure you can retain and keep those guys. And it's same true of us in the equipment game, in the supply chain, training and developing people, getting people on the CFSP course, for instance, all those elements are trying to improve the professionalism of the sector to make us more relevant to the end users as well. And just as I'm allowed just one last little sales pitch, all the information on the new Workhorse product is now fully available. We can share it with you either face-to-face. We'd love to come and see people if they feel comfortable to do that. We have a nice PowerPoint and presentations that will walk and talk people through all those features and benefits and additions that are putting what we believe is the world's most energy efficient, most sustainable product that produces the best wash results available in the marketplace. So thank you for allowing me to say that.
No problem, Glenn. I think we have run out of time now, though. So thank you very much, Jackie. Thank you very much, Glenn.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for watching. And we'll see you next week for another episode of Market Talk.